We knew who he was, so what we did was when we brought him back to police headquarters, we had his name already above the office door where we were going to conduct the interrogation. Mm-hmm. And I instructed the team who were doing the interrogation that they weren't to ask him one question. Mm-hmm. Nothing, zero. Take him back, let him see that his name's there, sit him down, be extremely polite to him, give him a cup of tea, treat him like he's an honored guest, and then leave him alone. So that's what we did. And they said, why are you doing that? I said, wait. Half an hour later, he asked to speak to me. I said, now he's going to confess. And that's what he did.
Sean Houghton, Dangerous Person 2.0, English channel. Today, again, I'm back with Chief Inspector Norman Mackillop, or just call you Norman.
Yes.
That's good enough. And this is the English version of Dangerous Person 2.0. So if you like this, don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, and hit the thumbs up. Before we get into the case today we're going to talk about Lo Chi-keung. And but before we do that, there are some things we talked about off camera that I really think we should share. First of all, now the case we're going to talk about today is 1 year after Bremer Hills. However, I want to finish up on Bremer Hills. And you mentioned something very interesting to me as to how did you find that stick, the murder weapon, in the Bremer Hills? Where was your mind? How, what made you walk in these directions?
Oh, in murder cases, scene of crime is, of course, very crucial. And it's very important, in my view, that as the officer the investigating officer, to try and put your mind into the mind of the perpetrator. So what was he thinking? How did he escape? Now, Bremer Hill, for example, the bodies were found on a barren hillside. So it's very important for me as the OC case, the officer in charge of the case, to get a feeling for the case. Not just an abstract view of the scene of crime and go through the motions about picking up exhibits and looking for witnesses, but to actually try and put your mind in the mind of the killers. This was a horrific killing frenzy. But what happened after the case? Where did they go? How did they escape? What was the most likely route? So in order to get a feeling for that, without a feeling you can't really, I think feelings, don't ever underestimate your gut feelings, in any case. So it's always a good thing to walk around the scene, particularly an outdoor scene. Go around. Don't just focus in, focus out, and get a view of the overall picture. And try, while you're walking, while you're thinking, try and put your mind in the mind of the killer. So what would he be thinking? How is he going to escape? How is he going to escape being detected or being seen by witnesses? So that was what I was thinking when I walked with 𝐒𝐫𝐤𝐥𝐿 around the scene, and we're discussing how do we think these people, which route would they take? And that's when we found the wooden stick, which turned out to be a murder weapon. But that applies to every case.
So actually, in this case, you did get in their mind, because that's how you found you actually were following their route, because they had to throw the stick.
Maybe perchance, I don't know, but
okay.
But that's what happened, yes.
Okay, now there's another thing you mentioned, feelings. And I had asked you this question. As a police officer, and you see, especially you, because you do a lot of murder cases, and you see a lot of victims, different ages, different races. I know about a 12-year-old, a 12-year-old girl or 11-year-old girl, a case you had to deal with. So how do you deal with that, your feelings? What's your advice there? How do you go to work every day?
how do you go to work every day? How does a surgeon go to work every day when people die in his hands on the operating table?
So
he has to maintain professionality, and he has to go to work. And
yeah, but some of them will turn to drink. They don't handle it properly. Some of them will turn it off as best as they can.
In my case, what I would always say to junior colleagues is say, live with your emotions. Don't ever try to follow a 𝐒𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿 sort of a mentality and be cold when you see the body. And don't be cold, be emotional. If you don't have the emotions, you won't have the drive to carry you forward day after day after day to try and solve the case. So don't be afraid of going home. When you finish the post-mortem, usually the following morning, you go home and you take your clothes off outside your home because they're still smelling. And there's nothing gets rid of that smell. So you undress outside your door and put your stuff in a black lane binder before you go into the door. Don't let your emotions be too cold, and don't let them get out of hand where you can't face the next day. Or you can't sleep at night. But don't suppress your emotions. It's what, in my case, is what drives me on.
So you embrace your emotions and use this as energy.
Yes.
And drive.
I'm outraged when I see a child on the post-mortem slab. Outraged when I come across Kenneth and McBride and Nicola Myers' bodies, horrific injuries that they suffered. I'm outraged, and that's what drives me forward. You don't walk around every day with outrage on your face. You deal with it in the professional way. But don't try and, I would say, have a 𝐒𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿 mentality and I'm cold. You won't have any drive if that's your mentality. That's my view.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that with us. A lot of because what we see on televisions is the hero cop is always cold and controls his emotions, this and that. Whereas in real life, I'm sitting with a real hero cop who embraced that emotion and used it to solve crimes. Okay, so now we're going to the next crime, and this is not a good case either. So you're heavily involved in this case, 𝐒𝐞𝐫.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what happened here?
Well, we got the call. It was the young girl found on the top staircase landing in a government housing estate. Now these are large blocks. There's probably about 10, 12, 15, 20 flats to one floor, and maybe 10, 20 floors.
So 200 units you're looking at?
Yeah. But her body was found, she was strung up. She was naked. She was 11 years old. And when
you say strung up, as a rope around her neck?
Rope around her neck, hanging.
Hanging?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we later ascertained that she lived in that block. So we get called in. Quite often we don't get called in until a few days after the case. The local police try their best to deal with the scene of crime and try and solve the case. And sometimes a week later we get handed the case. We prefer to get the case right down from the very beginning. So we're lucky to be called in right at the very beginning of this case. I don't mean to disrespectful to the local police, but sometimes the scene of crime is not handled the way we would deal with it. And if it's not handled from the correct way from the beginning, you can't correct it. Forensic evidence can be lost, etc. But we got it quickly this time. So it was a very peculiar case, and I say peculiar in this way, because it was very clear to me and the pathologist that the body was naked. She's 11 years old girl. Typical housing estate, there's no marble flooring. So she had been raped. Now even with
this is like a concrete floor.
It's concrete. We came to the conclusion that she couldn't have been killed in that location. Otherwise, her extremities, her elbows, her buttocks would have shown lots of signs of injuries from the abrasions from the concrete floor. So that was the first thing that was very apparent to us. and there was no items of clothing around. So it's inconceivable that she'd been taken there, dead, and hung up. But the hanging was post-mortem. That became very apparent.
Okay.
She'd been strangled. The hyoid bone, which is a typical indicator of strangulation, was broken. Now, even with a girl of 11 years old, it's not easy to kill a human being, even of 11 years old. The natural instinct is to struggle ferociously. There was no injuries, so it was very peculiar. So these were the basic facts that we knew within 24 hours from the post-mortem. The body, to me, the post-mortem is a very, very crucial part of any investigation, because the body tells us a lot. And the body was speaking to us. It was saying, the young girl was saying to us, me, my team, I wasn't killed here. Whoever killed me didn't kill me in some other block and then carry me here to the top floor. But that would be ridiculous. And it would be very dangerous for the killer. So I was killed somewhere in this building. That's the body saying to us during the post-mortem.
Okay.
I wasn't killed on a concrete floor. Right? I was taken here by killer to make it look like I was killed here. And they hung me up to look as if I was hung, like a suicide.
Yes.
I'm 11 years old, don't believe that. That's the body is saying to us.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's why I say post-mortems are very, very important. So we thought, let's look at this from a different way. Because normally we knew where the girl lived, right? And we very quickly tracked down the parents, interviewed them, and she had a sister as well. And she was seen getting into a lift with a stranger.
Okay,
right?
who saw her?
The sister.
The sister.
So we knew we had a vague description of the perpetrator. Now we knew the stranger didn't take her away somewhere else and then kill her and bring her back to where she lived and hang her up in that block. The body's telling us this. So we knew she was killed in this block. So we made a very unusual decision. In police work, we normally say cast the net wide. In this case, I thought, no, let's cast the net narrow. Now, when we do what we call house-to-house inquiries, we normally do it in a methodical way. We start at the bottom and work our way up all the flats, or start at the top and work our way down. Now, when I say cast your net wide, we didn't cast your net narrow. So that means we believe that she was killed somewhere in a private room, in a house, in a flat, in this building. It's inconceivable, and the body is saying to us, I wasn't carried here, I was killed in this building, I was carried upstairs. Right, okay, so we have to find out where was this girl killed.
And you have at least 200 units to look at, not to mention hallways.
So how do we do that? Now, if we did it the conventional way, we know word would get round very quickly. If, say, we started at top and we started knocking on doors, we could maybe do the top floors in one day, and by the time we got to the second top floor, no one would be home, because they don't want to open the door to a bunch of policemen. They wouldn't be home. And the other thing was, we wanted to do a very, very thorough search to the point where we would become scenes of crime scientists. And again, we used Jack Ballantyne, my favorite scene of crime expert, forensic scientist from headquarters. And I said to Jack, this is what I plan to do, because where she was killed, we haven't found the girl's clothes, but where she was killed, we might find some forensic evidence, right? There was a bit of dust on the body and things of that nature. I'm talking about contact. If I rub this on you, some of your fibers will stay on me, and some of my fibers will stay on you. So it's contact evidence, things of that nature. Now, to preserve contact evidence, we have to avoid contamination. So we couldn't go into one flat and do some forensic, because we couldn't possibly ask a forensic scientist to come with us all the time. We had to do it ourselves, but we had to do it to the highest standards. If evidence was preserved, was found, we had to preserve it. Right? So we got advice and some teaching from Jack Valentine. This is how to do it. Right? And this is the equipment that you need. Okay. If you need any help, call me. But I'll come with you the first year to make sure you guys know what they're doing and how to preserve anything. And after that, you're on your own. But if you need me, call me. Okay. So that was great. The other thing we had to do is we wouldn't ask normal house-to-house questions. Who lives here? Right? And then get all the ID cards and then do criminal record checks and this sort of thing. No, we had to go a hell of a lot further than that. We had to know not only who lived here, who visits here on a regular basis, and who has visited here but you haven't seen them since the murder. Right? And have you seen anything suspicious? If so, what? And is everyone that we've interviewed here, or is there some people who live here that we haven't interviewed yet? We had to be very, very detailed. So we wrote down everything for the teams. This is what you need to do. So we couldn't possibly do floor by floor. And not only couldn't we possibly do it, it's going to take forever. We didn't care. We didn't care, because if the killer's would live there and he's gone, that's what we wanted to find out by our system. So we devised this very, very detailed system. And we put a chart up on the wall and say, okay, we'll do that flat on the top floor, flat 23, today. And we'll do this flat as in the second floor, number 25, today. No more.
Okay.
And when we're satisfied, we have thoroughly got all the information we want from these two flats, we'll move on to the next one. But that's going to take maybe 3, I don't care.
Okay.
I couldn't care less.
Okay. So, but this also prevents the floors from fleeing.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and it's very low key.
Okay.
But don't forget, we'd go into each flat with dressed up like spacemen.
Okay.
And then we'd take all this off before we even, and we put that into special bags and containers. And to send it to Jack's office so that he can preserve whatever they find there. We don't want to take that and move to the next flat. We have to be clean. So that takes time. It takes thoroughness. But I was convinced that this is the only way we're going to solve this. The murderer's probably flown. So we're not going to catch him unless we do this in a very thorough way. And the other thing is we might be able to establish where the 𝐤𝐫𝐤 was killed.
Okay.
So the team they've never done this before. And they thought, well, it's going to take, and this was the case when I say cast the net narrow, not wide.
Yeah.
No matter how long it takes, it doesn't matter. So day after day after day, and then the teams would come back and debriefed. But they would have to do a hell of a lot of follow-up. They wouldn't just do one house and one day, one flat and one house, and it would be finished. No, because there's 3 people that live there that we haven't interviewed there. So we'd have to go back.
Yeah, are you checking their workplace and everything?
Very, very, very detailed. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful. Because the piece of information that we want might just slip through if we're not thorough. So we doggedly carried on with this. And of course, we're keeping in contact with the parents and stuff like that. And before I move on to, let's get me back to that emotion bit. When the girl, the sister and the father and mother were at police headquarters being interrogated, not interrogated, being questioned. Of course, it was a very sad occasion.
Sure.
And one of the guys had a day off and he'd been hiking, and he'd come back to the office with, he'd found a budgie, little budgie bird.
A real bird?
A real bird.
Okay.
Like a little, tiny little thing like that. So he'd found it, it probably escaped as a pet, and it was exhausted, and he'd taken it back to the office. And the little girl's sister saw it. So he gave it to her.
Nice.
And I thought, that's right. So that kept her a little bit happy. But you know what? This time is about 11 o'clock at night. The girl went to the toilet, and then the budgie died. And I thought, oh my God, the girl's going to come back from the toilet and the budgie's dead. So Peter 𝐒𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐸 was one of my key guys. He's died now, but he was a fantastic guy. I said, Peter, we can't let this girl see the dead budgie. He went out and he scoured Hong Kong, Kowloon, until he came back with a live budgie. How he did it, I don't know. And he put it in the cage. And the budgies, that's why I'm saying just keep your emotions. But anyway, getting back to that house to house, it took us months, and the team were getting a bit despondent. They thought, oh, we're on the wrong track. No, stick to it. Don't miss anything. Go back to the same house until you've extracted every piece of information. So one night they came back. A sergeant came back with the team, one of my best sergeants. And of course, we are in the office every night waiting for the teams to come back. We don't go home until the teams come back. So we can debrief them and say, no, you need to go back and do this. And they came back and they said, they found something strange. We went into a flat and there was 2 girls there. And so we had the woman police with us. And he asked the girls, where's your mum, where's your dad? And they seemed a bit strange. They couldn't put their finger on it, but there was something strange. And so they weren't quite sure about it. So the mum's out working. She works in a beauty shop. We don't often see the dad. But who else lives here? No one. So you 2 are on. One was 15, the other was 13. No one. But there's an uncle that comes here, but we haven't seen him for a while. Okay. So I said to the sergeant, I said, bring the girls back. We need to speak to them under good circumstances and with the woman police and stuff like that. We took them back, and we had the mother there as well, and she was she acted very strangely too. And anyway, we interrogated but questioned the 15-year-old, and eventually she said that this uncle person often came back and he had a key to the flat, but he was the girlfriend of the mother, her boyfriend of the mother, but he hadn't been seen since the murder. So, and after very, very careful interrogation, we found that this guy had actually been sexually assaulting the girls.
The 15 and 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the mother worked in a massage parlor, not a beauty parlor, a massage parlor. And this was the boyfriend of the mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in those days, a massage parlor
is a place for sexual.
Okay.
So we took more detailed statements from the girls, and we narrowed down that this person was exactly the type of person we were looking for, who was a regular visitor but had never come back since the murder. So that's how we zeroed in on 𝐒𝐫𝐤𝐥𝐸. We used various means to establish where he lived, and eventually we did a raid, and we found them hiding under the bed, and dragged them out from under the bed. And again, knowing that there was very little forensic evidence at that stage. No eyewitnesses, of course, that if anything he said was crucial, and we had to preserve it. So I grabbed a neighbor and asked the sergeant, caution him now in front of this independent person we've never seen in our lives before, and get him to be a witness that he's been cautioned. and a record noted. And we knew who he was, so what we did was when we brought him back to police headquarters, we had his name already above the office door where we were going to conduct the interrogation. And I instructed the team who were doing the interrogation that they weren't to ask him one question. Nothing, zero. Take him back, let him see that his name's there, sit him down, be extremely polite to him, give him a cup of tea, treat him like he's an honored guest, and then leave him alone. So that's what we did. And they said, why are you doing that? I said, wait. Half an hour later, he asked to speak to me. I said, now he's going to confess. And that's what he did. I don't know why, but it worked.
So he didn't deny it, he confessed.
He didn't deny anything.
Okay.
He didn't say anything.
Okay, so...
But then when he was brought back to the office, he was left there, treated extremely nicely, not handcuffed, given a cup of tea.
So you're just letting his own mind work on him.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
And he said, I want to see Mackillop. And so I said, okay, he's going to confess now, I was pretty sure. And he did. He started confessing. So he gave a story that he had... he was involved in the case, but he wasn't the actual murderer. There was a rubbish cleaner involved in the block who had actually perpetrated murder. He'd been involved in some sexual things, but not the murder.
So his original story was they were going to ransom the girl?
Yeah, so it was all... and so, getting back to your question about Reconstruction, this is different type of situation where he gives a very convoluted story. He introduces another party who's not
rubbish
aware.
cleaner.
Yeah. So our investigation becomes wider almost. We've got him. He's confessed to being involved, but not to the point of killing. He's involved with another party. Now, as investigators, we want to find out who is this other party. How can we arrest him if he exists?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we're perfectly entitled to ask further questions. Okay, I'm not quite sure how she came to be hanged up there. You're not very clear on that. Would you mind coming with us to the scene and just explaining in more detail how did this happen?
Now, there's one big difference. Now, you're a barrister.
Yeah.
And on top of being a police officer, you became a barrister.
Yeah, but long after this.
Okay. So now in the Bremer Hill case, you were clear that you didn't reconstruct
No, there was no
anything.
reconstruction.
Now in this case, what's the approach you take?
There is a reconstruction.
There is.
Because he's involving another party, which we then have a duty to try and identify if he exists. Right, but if he does exist, we've got a clear duty to continue our investigation until we identify him or get sufficiently more clarity in the stories which would help us to identify him.
Yeah.
Should we do that, or should we just, no, we don't care about him. Why would we bother? We've got him. But we're not sure, and we shouldn't be sure that there is not a third party. He says there is.
And he's actually implying that party is the killer, not him.
Yeah.
So you can't leave
so
that.
we're entitled to, we can't just leave that hanging there. Okay, let's not bother look at that in case the appeal court doesn't allow us to, or kicks the case out because we've bothered to try and track this third party down. No, we go ahead.
So your thinking is you're now going to reconstruct the scene to get more on the third party. Okay.
Right.
And then what happens?
So we take him back under very tight conditions. And don't forget, there's one other thing we did to preserve the evidence in this case is because we realized that this is another typical case where we need to preserve any confessional evidence. So I got a justice of the peace.
Okay.
Who happened to be a head teacher of a school, but was an appointed justice of the peace. So I thought, well, I need to get someone really independent who's going to witness the interrogation and the statements taken from this person. So he sat in.
Okay.
To reinforce our case, this man wasn't coerced. He wasn't threatened. We didn't force any confessions at him. He wasn't beaten up.
Yeah. So his mere presence kills any type of...
Well, we would think so.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
That was our situation. Anyway, we decided to do the reconstruction, and it was videotaped. Mm-hmm. We had independent people there who were not connected with our case, who were uniform branch. He was voluntarily done. Mm-hmm. Now, during the trial, that video evidence, I'm quite sure in the minds of the jury convicted him.
Okay.
Because it was very apparent that he was making it up as he went along, because it was not true.
So the video evidence during the reconstruction was apparent he was making things up?
Yes, yeah. It was quite apparent to even the layperson. This guy he's just making it up. He says this, and then he does this, and then where's the rubbish cleaner?
Yeah. Okay.
We forgot to mention him.
Yeah. So the day before he said there was a rubbish cleaner, and the next day you go back, and what does he say about the rubbish cleaner?
Nothing.
He disappeared from the story.
No, we're not questioning him.
Okay.
We're asking him to clarify and to just show us what happened, and he's doing all the talking.
But he does mention the rubbish cleaner.
So anyway.
Okay.
It was quite clear from that video, standing alone as a piece of evidence, this guy's lying. He's making up this story.
Okay,
right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Anyway, so that became very, very important, crucial piece of evidence, which of course came under challenge in the appeal.
Yeah, Mr. Sarney, I think.
Sarney, yeah. Yes.
Sarney. But he's discredited himself on tape.
Yes.
Okay. So again, this is a matter of sight. So when people see it, it's very hard to recover from mistakes you made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, Sarney, the defense counsel during the trial, alleged that this was a charade. The whole thing was acting out. It was directed.
Yes.
And the appeal court said, well, it's impossible.
Yeah, I read the judge's points about how you would need a whole film crew.
Yes.
You need scripts. You'd need... pauses at any time the guy could go off script. It was just basically impossible to do that.
And the Court of Appeal, all three of them also said that they were very they seemed very disappointed. They said categorically, when understanding that a barrister has to take instructions from his client, in other words, the client tells him this is what happened.
Yeah.
They directed me to do all this. I didn't do anything. He has a duty to say, okay, you can't just make an allegation like this. Give me evidence to support your allegation that the police directed this like a movie.
Yeah.
And he couldn't. He didn't bother to do that. So the judge said, these are very serious allegations.
Yeah.
And as a matter of law, you should push your client to give supporting evidence to support this before you bring it to court as a serious allegation.
Yes, and also he was admonished for, because he would take it to a certain limit, Sarney, and then stop and say, oh, that's all the instructions I have.
No, that's not good enough.
And the judge says that's not good enough, okay? So you need to make clear what those instructions are. They can't just be when you decide to stop.
So this case could be distinguished by... one of the main factors is that it wasn't the movie or the reconstruction wasn't done to reinforce a previous statement, because the reconstruction is very different from the previous statement.
Yeah, it went completely off script from the original written
Don't
script.
say off script.
Yeah, okay. Off the murderer's script.
But he'd also introduced another party. So we had a right, so to speak, to... Okay, we need to continue our investigation. He's mentioned there's a rubbish cleaner, so help us. Rather the same as the judge is saying to the defense counsel, your guy says that this was a script put together with directors and producers and lighting and all the rest of it. You need to push your client better to give supporting evidence. And likewise for us, when he said there's another party involved, now I didn't actually do it, he was there, but okay, come. Would you help us to find this guy and identify him and clarify what actually happened at the scene? So there's a balance there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but at the bottom line, there was no rubbish cleaner.
No.
Okay, so bottom line, he is the murderer.
Yes.
And how did you get to that? Did he confess eventually, or?
No, he not full confession. He confessed involvement with the girl in sexual ways, but not actually killing her.
I see. So he confessed that he was there, that he sexually molested her, but there was no second or third party at any time. So he's the only person who could be there.
Yes.
And she's dead.
Yes.
Okay. So did you ever find the clothes?
No.
No. Never found the
They
clothes.
were discarded in the rubbish heaps.
Okay. And he did he ever admit that he hung her?
No.
No, didn't do that.
That was to make it look like suicide.
It was to make it look like suicide. So, did you know how was he sentenced to life imprisonment?
He was sentenced to death.
He was sentenced to
That
death.
was the only sentence the court was allowed to pronounce in these days.
Good.
But of course, because the death sentence was still in the books.
Yeah.
In Hong Kong.
So did it revert to a life sentence, or did he actually? Oh, okay.
Life sentence.
So had a little reprieve. Okay, and your reasoning again for reconstructing this was because of that third party.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we have a.
You have a nosy buddy. Hi, I'm your big fan. Hi, Norman. I was watching this. It's just so I was crying. It was when I hear the bird. That was so touching. The little bird.
Oh, the bird.
You guys really went all the way. Well, anyway, so I'm just curious. Did the rape happen in the unit of the massage lady?
No. We believe it happened in the unit where the girls were located. That he would go. He had the key for that flat. Remember?
Yeah, I mean the 13-year-old and the 15-year-old.
Yes.
They weren't there, and he took this opportunity to rape the girl there. Any forensic evidence found? Nothing. So it's all cleaned up.
It's cleaned up.
Any semen in the girl's body? Nothing. How did that happen? Oh, using a condom.
You knew she must have lost her virginity.
Yes.
So we could tell a rape did happen.
Yes.
Okay.
But no semen could be because that guy used a condom.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you can't find anything. So all the clothes. How about the fingernails?
No, we didn't. That's another thing. We didn't find anything under the fingernails.
There was no struggling at all. So what could have happened?
It's strangulation.
Yeah,
So
but
did he
her
kill
hands
her?
could have been tied.
The hands, there were some abrasions on the wrist, but when the body was found, there was no ties on the wrist. There was some signs of the wrist having been tied.
Right.
So then he removed the ropes after the incident. So that's why you probably don't have anything under the finger.
Yeah, we can only surmise that because he of course his confession was a partial confession, not a full confession.
So, but he confessed all the point up to he sexually attacked the girl. So I'm just trying to reconstruct it in my mind.
Yes.
So the girl met this man. They went into the elevator. The man somehow lured the girl into that unit.
Yes.
And then he might have tied her hands.
Yes.
Or he might have even killed her before he molested her.
Yes.
So there was no semen because he was using a condom. And he has to kill the girl because the girl saw his face.
Yeah, and the girl was undressed completely and then taken up to the top floor and then hung up to make it a kind of...
But it was really high up. The thing
it's
is...
right on the top floor.
Right on the top floor.
Yeah.
So the girl was hanging on the public stairs.
Yes.
So how on earth could anybody believe that the girl did that to herself? Because the rope was very long, right?
Just in his mind,
So that's not a very clever criminal.
So when you say the public stairs, you mean like the fire escape type stairs?
The walk up the stairs.
Okay, it's
above where the last lift is, there's another staircase going up, and then there's a door to the rooftop.
okay, and she's hanging from that ceiling.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but did he bring her there and remove the clothes, or he brought her naked, or we don't know?
Naked.
Okay,
The rubbish cleaner and him. His story was not clear. That's why I believe we were entitled to go to do a reconstruction. His story was convoluted. It wasn't clear. There was a third party, the rubbish cleaner, that you couldn't name. He couldn't really describe how he knew him. All this.
Was there ever a possibility there was a third party and he was protecting it, or that was just garbage.
No, it's just garbage.
Well,
How could you ransom an 11-year-old girl from such a poor family?
Sure, yeah. That
also-
doesn't make sense at all, that part, yeah.
You know about the poor guy that found the body. I wrote about it in one of my books.
Yes?
Yes. So there was a guy. I think he had a fight with his family member, and he went out to the roof to have a cigarette break. And then somehow after that, he came out and he saw this hanging dead body right in front of his eyes.
But when you went up there, the body wasn't there, and when you came down, it was there?
No, you probably wouldn't notice it.
Yeah, maybe he didn't
He
see
might
it.
have walked past it the
He
first
might
time
have.
on his way down.
It was really
different
high
angle.
up.
Yeah.
Oh, poor guy. Well,
Yeah.
well, anyway, that's why I'm going to step out. I'm actually watching you guys talking about the case over there. So I'm going to zip my mouth and get back there. Thank you, Norman.
So that was our host, who just likes to drop in now and then. So now, back to the Bryn Mawr Hill, where those allegations, racism of using resources, too many resources to look for white folk. In this instance, everyone is Chinese here. Did you have to use a lot of resources to go through this estate? And were you given everything you asked for?
Yes, we were given everything we asked for.
Okay.
Remember, we had Jack Ballantyne.
So this is just Chinese suspects, Chinese victims.
Yes.
Okay, and this is just standard operating procedure for you. It doesn't matter what color people are.
Of course not.
Okay, good.
Absolutely irrelevant. It might be some bearing on how the case is handled from the point of view of who might be involved in the case, but it's not a racial issue at all.
Okay, well, we have to address this only because of those allegations that were made in the Bryn Mawr Hill by the Chinese press, which is continuing to show did not apply.
It's to me, I find it very insulting.
Okay.
At that time, we were a colonial police force by definition. But since I joined the police in '73, we were fully integrated.
Okay.
But by the '80s, we had our majority of our senior officers were Chinese. Shortly after that, we had our first Chinese chief of police, and thereafter it was Chinese chiefs of police. In all my career, I only reported to immediate superior would be only a few times was he a European. They were mostly Chinese.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Because
it wasn't like a colonial police force with all the Chinese subordinates. No, it wasn't like that at all. We were the subordinates.
Okay. Yeah. Because in different sector, you had different things. Like in the judiciary, I think the first Chinese judge appeared in 1996.
96?
Who was the first Chinese judge?
I mean,
on
high court judge?
Yeah.
Yang Tieliang? I think
I think so.
It's Chief Justice.
Chief Justice, you're right.
Chief
Chinese
Justice.
judge, I can't remember. It's way early, I think.
Oh,
But,
way earlier,
Way
yes.
early.
The magistrate judge, Marjorie G.
We had plenty of Chinese magistrates.
Yes.
Way back in the early 70s.
So you had plenty of Chinese magistrates, but when it came to the High Court, from what I've read, actually some of them didn't even want to work with.
Oh, we had plenty of Chinese judges, and Yang was he the first chief
He's
justice?
the first chief.
Justice.
He's the first chief justice, and it occurred after that famous case,
The
𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐼
McLennan
House.
case. McLennan case, he was in charge of the commission of inquiry into the McLennan case, and shortly after that, he became chief justice.
Well, I have a question
Yeah.
about resources. I would like to know the protocol that you got from your forensic expert about entering every apartment, and what do you need to do before and after that particular part.
Oh, if we're looking for forensic evidence, we couldn't come out of that flat after gathering dust or whatever. We couldn't use the same shoes to go into another flat.
Were you sending plainclothes policemen or?
Yes, but we had
Everyone has to wear a hazmat suit, so to speak.
Suits.
Everything's covered, and you got to get
covered
in.
shoes and cleaned, and and then we have to take all these coverings off and put them in a bag so they can contaminate everything.
So I was actually thinking, were you guys sent into every apartment to collect the specimen in that?
Yes.
So you're actually absorbing the environment and then bag it?
But we had to do it in a very, very careful way. We had to get permission. To get search warrants for all these flats wouldn't be practical. So we had to get permission. So that's why we didn't want to do flat A, B, C, D, E, F. No, because by the time we got to flat C, no one would be home.
Sure.
They didn't want to be home.
Yeah. So there's a lot of resources.
So we went from there to there, 2 in one night, 2 in one day, or maybe in the night.
Sure, wow.
And then we might have to go back because we haven't found the brother who usually lives there. He hasn't been for a week or two, so we had to track him down.
So did you actually have to do every single unit before you broke the case?
No.
You did every single unit?
No.
You didn't have to?
No.
Okay.
We got to, I think we got about 2 or 3 months into the case.
Okay.
Before this broke.
Yeah, because that's a
Maybe
minimum of 100 nights if you're going to do 200 units.
Yeah. So I think we're a couple of months into it before this broke. And the sergeant came back. That same sergeant, he appears in here in the appeal court case, and all the way up to the Privy Council.
Sergeant Wang.
Yeah, Sergeant Wang.
Yeah, they tried to break him on the stand, but he couldn't shake him at all.
We'd worked together for many years, and so when we arrested 𝐒𝐞𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿, Sergeant Wang was with me, and I made him do the caution.
Yes.
Now that's a big honor for a detective. The person who cautions the arrested person, that's his bag. And he's the most important man in the case. And it was a big honor when I gave Sergeant Wang, you caution him now.
Yeah.
So to him that was a big honor. Sure. So that case became his.
Yeah.
And that's the tradition in the Hong Kong police.
He also seemed to be pretty smart.
Oh, very smart.
Because in the middle of the recreation, when Lam started to go off, Lo started going off the murder script, in the middle of it, Wang said, hang on a second, I'm going to give you another caution.
Yes,
you know?
yes. And that was mentioned in the Privy Council as well.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no unfairness.
Yeah, so that's excellent police work, actually.
That is very smart.
Yeah.
And I made sure that he got a commissioner's accommodation for that case.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I got a personal question for you.
Yes.
You have been a very successful, heroic even police officer.
Right. No.
I think you are. A lot of fans. So, but you became a barrister later. So if you became a barrister, that would mean that you're going to fight for criminals. How do you reconcile?
Oh, there's not a problem. And as barristers in the UK, we sometimes prosecute and sometimes defend because we're there for the law. And the judge is there to make sure that we act within the law and we act fairly within the court rules. So I did quite a lot of triad cases when I was in the UK because I spoke Cantonese. So a Cantonese solicitor found me and he would send me cases, triads. I found no difficulty in defending. Because
actually, on the triads, you actually really know them because you were telling me you have a master on this subject.
𝐿𝐵𝐴𝐿
was with me. He became the triad expert in Hong Kong. But I did a master's in the UK on police and criminal justice. But my thesis was on the Chinese secret societies, which are triads.
Yes, yes.
So I studied them in the UK. And it gave me a better insight. By that time I was a superintendent. So I had a lot of experience in triads. So when I did the Masters in Exeter, but I studied them against a kind of clear backdrop, the triads, how they operate in the UK. So it gave me a much better understanding than trying to study them in Hong Kong, which is very complicated. But when you see them in the UK, you get a much better understanding how they operate. So yeah.
Do they still do the poems in no? They do a lot of poems, the triad poems.
No.
They don't do that.
No, the old Blue Lantern.
Yeah, the Blue Lantern,
You know,
the 489, the 426, all sorts of numbers.
No, the Blue Lantern member is someone who hasn't done the poems.
The 49.
No, he's the 𝐒𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿𝐤𝐥𝐿. He's the 𝐒𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿𝐤 is the 49 member. Then you have the low 𝐒𝐫𝐢𝐥𝐿, the old 𝐒𝐫𝐿s, who are actually kind of senior 49. It goes on and on. But don't think too much about triads. They're not as organized as people. They like people to think that because that instills some misconception that there's some organized group. They're only They're not that organized.
So another thing is a misperception by the public. They always ask this question, aren't you supposed to be righteous? How can you be defending the criminals? So procedural fairness and the normal people thinking fairness, they have a difference in that, right?
Okay, let me give you an example. I defended a guy in the UK. He'd been picked up in London about 4 o'clock in the morning in a shop doorway. It was shut. We had allegedly 2 machetes.
Okay.
2 big knives, and he was picked up by the Metropolitan Police. So I thought I was given the case to defend him. I thought, well, how am I going to do this? So anyway, I went to the prison and I interviewed him to take instructions. And he said he was an illegal immigrant. And the police said that he'd run away. And he was eventually hiding in a coal bunker in someone's garden, found by the police dogs. Right? Okay. And he's an illegal immigrant. He told me, he says, I've been an illegal immigrant in the UK for 10 years. It's very common in the UK. So he got a call to go to a snooker parlour in London. And he didn't speak very good English. So he asked the taxi driver to go to a cinema, which he knew was just near the snooker parlour, and then he would walk. And so the taxi driver dropped him near the cinema. It was early hours of the morning. He went into a little alcove beside an Italian restaurant to have a pee. And while he was having a pee, this police car came up and they shouted at him. And he saw there was a couple of machetes and they shouted at him. He said, I ran away because I'm an illegal immigrant. So you didn't have machetes? No, I didn't have machetes, and wasn't involved in anything like that. I got his story, I put him in the witness box. But prior to that, I asked for the police notebooks. And the sergeant and the constable who eventually arrested this guy said they saw him in the alcove holding 2 machetes. Right? And then they shouted at him to stay where he was, and he ran away.
And he says he never had machetes.
He never had machetes. So I got the 2 notebooks, and I saw they were exactly the same, the way they were written. Exactly the same, including they misspelled the machetes. Right? The plural for machetes, they misspelled them. So I got the sergeant first, and I said, okay, sergeant, you went back to the canteen. Did you corroborate with your colleague on what actually transpired? He says, no. Did you discuss and then corroborate your notes? He says, no, I didn't do that. I says, no, why not? No, we never do that. And I know that it's perfectly correct. There's no problem. 2 police officers, is this the way it happened? Yeah, that's the way it happened. I think there's no problem with that. He said, no, I never corroborated. So then I got the constable in, and he followed the sergeant in the witness box. I said to the constable, what happened? He said, well, then this happened and that happened. Then you went back to the canteen? Yes. And then you sat down with the sergeant? Yes. Did you write your notebook? Did you corroborate with the sergeant? He says, no, I wrote my own notes. I didn't corroborate with the sergeant. So I got the sergeant's notebook and I said, "Will you read that, please?" And he read out. I said, "Okay, now read me your notebook." And he read out exactly. He said, "How do you spell machetes?" He says, "It's got it wrong too." The jury started laughing. And it took 15 minutes to find this guy not guilty. And then after that, the judge said to me, "Mr. Mackillop, would you like to take this further?" In other words, they'd committed perjury.
Yes.
Now, perjury is a far more serious offence than carrying a machete.
What about also fabricating evidence?
Yes.
Yes.
There's perjury.
Malicious prosecution.
All kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. Perjury.
So the judge says, where do you want to take this?
I said no. But after the court case, the sergeant and the counsel, the prosecutor, hung around. They said they'd like this. Not the sergeant, the young police officer, they'd like to speak to me. I said, "That's fine as long as you're here with them." And the young police officer said, "Were you a former policeman?" I said, "Yes." Oh, he said, "No, that's why." And I said, "Let me, if you don't mind, I'll give you a bit of advice. Never, ever jeopardize your career and your freedom by telling lies in the witness box, right? Don't ever do that again, or you'll never be a policeman for very much longer. As you're very lucky you have me, right? Otherwise, you'd find yourself
Someone else could
on
push you all
trial.
the way.
On trial, right? So don't do that again. That's the only advice I can give you. And the prosecutor said, "Thank you."
So, but the machete misspelling.
Yeah. Don't
Is it
ask
because
me.
one person wrote both reports, or they said, "How do you
Copy
spell it?"
straight
Are
out.
they supposed
Straight out.
Copy straight out.
copy straight out?
No, there's nothing wrong with the two police officers collaborating and saying, "Is this the way I remember? Am I right?" But not to copy exactly
Yeah.
the spelling. But the thing is, the lie. So, as a barrister, you're not always clever. A defense counsel, you're not always clever because you're so much clever. It's because the prosecutors have made mistakes, and you know they've made mistakes. So it doesn't mean that you've let a guilty person off. It means that you've shown that the law is not bad. You can't tell lies in the witness box.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, I know quite a few people that lie
You
in the
don't-
witness box, but
Yeah,
you always catch them.
as defense counsel, you're not there to teach the defendant how to conduct his defense.
Yes.
You take the instructions from the defendant.
Yes.
And you cross-examine. If you can tell the defendant, I don't think anyone's going to believe this story. Can't you give me more information to back up? No. So, okay, well, I'm telling you that I don't really have a good defense for you. Do you understand? Oh, yeah, I insist on pleading not guilty. Well, sign the back of my brief, please. I'm advising you that this is not a good defense and you're likely to be found guilty. That's my advice to you.
Yeah.
Do you still insist on me going ahead?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
So there's no conflict in my heart with defending someone, and it's not my job to decide if they're guilty or not guilty. It's the judge or the jury.
You're just
Not my
making sure
job.
the procedure is fair.
It's fair and
Yeah,
correct.
that's what lawyers do.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of misperception. Oh, you're a good person. How can you help the bad guys? Sometimes we're not helping the bad guys, but we're upholding the process.
Yes, that's right. Exactly that.
So, all right. Thank you so much for telling us the story that we have always got a lot of questions to.
Yeah.
And that's in the judgment for the little girl's case, it's not much mentioned. So thank you so much. And thank you, Sean. If you like our channel, please subscribe, like, and share. And until the next episode, I still have a big question for you, because you know you have been a lot in my books. A lot of my stories, Dangerous Person, you are the main characters in
Oh,
it.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Wow. Well, I believe that I will have to translate it. You have to help me to translate them to Norman.
Oh.
He's a hero.
No,
He's
I'm not a
amazing.
hero. No,
He's a
no,
good
no.
lawyer as well. In the old days, there's a lot of Hong Kong policemen on government funding to become lawyers.
I didn't have government funding.
I know you pay it for yourself, but because of too many lawyers are from the police force, so the police stop funding them because all the good lawyers
All the good police become lawyers.
and they really know their stuff.
They've lived it on the street level, going up the ranks.
Well.
Well, all right, we'll see ya.
Yeah, so don't forget to subscribe and a thumbs up.